An elderly woman and her little granddaughter were violently thrown out of their home by debt collectors in a freezing night storm. As the child's breathing grew shallow and her body burned with fever, the grandmother tried everything but nothing worked, terror tightening around her chest. Suddenly she spotted a car beneath a flickering streetlight. With no hope left, she staggered forward, pounding on the window and begging the stranger inside for help. She had no idea the man who opened the door was a billionaire. What happened next would change their lives forever. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The blizzard hit Edgewater like God's own fury unleashed upon the earth. Margaret Sullivan woke to the sound of fists pounding on her door, not knocking, pounding, the kind of violence that said whoever was out there didn't care about courtesy or consequences. She knew immediately who it was. You didn't live in Edgewater for 72 years without learning to recognize the sound of trouble coming for you. Kayla, Margaret whispered urgently, pushing herself out of bed. Every joint protested. Her knees, her hips, her back that hadn't been right since she'd fallen on ice 3 winters ago. But pain was just part of being old. You learn to move through it. Kayla, baby, wake up. The 4-year-old stirred in the small bed across the room, her breath coming in soft, congested huffs. She'd been fighting a cold for days, the kind of persistent cough that rattled in her small chest and kept them both awake at night. Margaret had been giving her honey and keeping her warm, but the medicine from the free clinic had run out 2 days ago and there was no money for more until her Social Security check came next week. The pounding came again, harder this time. Then a voice, rough and slurred with alcohol. Open up, old woman. We know you're in there. Margaret's hands shook as she pulled on her robe, the faded pink one Jeremiah had given her before the pills had taken him, before everything had fallen apart. She could hear Kayla whimpering now, frightened by the voices, and Margaret wanted nothing more than to crawl back into bed, pull the covers over both their heads and pretend this wasn't happening. But pretending never stopped the red jackals. Nothing stopped them. She shuffled to the door, her worn slippers barely protecting her feet from the cold floor. The heating oil had run out yesterday. The space heater in Kayla's room was eating through what little money she had left, but she couldn't let the child freeze, couldn't let her get sicker. I'm coming, Margaret called out, her voice thin and wavering. Please, I'm coming. Don't break the door. She opened it to find 3 men on her porch, snow swirling around them in the harsh wind. Leon Vance stood front and center, 30-something, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if cruelty hadn't carved its lines too deep. His 2 companions flanked him, thick winter coats making them look even larger and more threatening. About time. Leon pushed past her into the house without invitation, his boots tracking snow and mud across her clean floor. The other 2 followed. One of them, a man whose name Margaret didn't know but whose flat, empty eyes she'd seen around the neighborhood, closed the door behind them, sealing off her escape. It's 2 in the morning, Margaret said, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you want? What do we want? Leon laughed, pulling a document from his coat. We want what's owed. Your boy Jeremiah took out a loan 3 years ago. $15,000. With interest, penalties and fees that's grown to $42,000. Time to pay up. Jeremiah is dead. Margaret's voice cracked. He died trying to pay you people. Worked himself into a heart attack at 36 years old. The debt died with him. See, that's where you're wrong. Leon unfolded the papers, thrust them toward her. Debt transfers to next of kin. That's you, Grandma. And since you can't pay, and we both know you can't pay, we're here to collect collateral. Margaret looked at the document with shaking hands. It was official looking, stamped and signed, but she knew it was fake. Had to be fake. This wasn't how legal debt worked. But the Red Jackals didn't care about legal. They cared about money and power and crushing anyone who couldn't fight back. I don't have anything, she said desperately. I live on $900 a month. I'm raising my granddaughter on that. There's nothing to take. There's the house. Leon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sign it over to us, the debt's forgiven. Simple as that. You got 72 hours to find somewhere else to live, but that's not our problem. This is my home. I've lived here for 40 years, then you should have raised a son who paid his debts. Leon's voice went cold. Sign the paper or we take it the hard way. Your choice. You got 60 seconds. Margaret's mind raced. The house was all she had, all Kayla had. If she signed, they'd be on the street with nowhere to go. But if she didn't sign, 50 seconds. A small voice came from the bedroom doorway. Grandma? They all turned. Kayla stood there in her thin nightgown, clutching her stuffed elephant, the one Jeremiah had won for her at the county fair the summer before he died. Her face was flushed, her eyes glassy with fever and fear. Go back to bed, sweetheart, Margaret said as gently as she could. Everything's fine. Leon glanced at Kayla, then back at Margaret. 30 seconds. Sign or we make this difficult. Margaret looked at the paper in her shaking hands, looked at Kayla, so small and vulnerable in the doorway, thought about Jeremiah, about how she'd failed to save him from his addiction, from the debt that had killed him. She couldn't fail Kayla too, but she also couldn't just hand over everything. No, Margaret said quietly. Leon's expression darkened. What? I said no. Margaret straightened her spine despite the fear coursing through her. This is my home. My granddaughter's home. You can't have it. For a moment nobody moved. Then Leon nodded to his men. Get them out. Now. What? No. Margaret tried to block them, but one of the men simply pushed her aside. She stumbled, caught herself on the wall, pain shooting through her hip where she hit the door frame. You had a choice, Leon said coldly. Remember that. He grabbed Margaret's arm, pulled her toward the door. The other men were already opening it, letting in a blast of Arctic air and swirling snow. Margaret struggled, but Leon's grip was iron. Please, Margaret begged. Please at least let me get our coats. The child is sick, she'll freeze. Leon hesitated for just a moment, calculating. Then 5 minutes. Grab what you can carry. After that we're done being nice. Margaret stumbled to the bedroom, her hands shaking so badly she could barely function. She grabbed the bag Jeremiah had left behind, the duffel he'd used for work, and started stuffing things inside. Clothes for Kayla, her own heavy coat, the folder of papers, Jeremiah's birth certificate, Kayla's her own documents, a photo of her late husband, the last picture of Jeremiah before the drugs had hollowed him out. She pulled Kayla's winter coat onto the child, wrapped a scarf around her neck, grabbed Kayla's stuffed elephant and shoved it in the bag. Time's up. Leon's voice boomed from the front room. Margaret shouldered the bag, heavy and awkward, took Kayla's hand and shuffled back out. Leon was standing by the open door, snow already accumulating on the threshold. Out. Both of you. Now. Margaret pulled Kayla close and stepped out into the night. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Snow stung her face. Wind cut through her coat as if it wasn't even there. Behind them, the door slammed shut. Margaret heard the deadbolt slide home with a sound like a coffin closing. They stood on the porch for a moment, Margaret trying to process what had just happened. They'd been thrown out of their home, in the middle of winter, in the middle of a blizzard, with nowhere to go and no one to help them. Grandma, I'm cold, Kayla whimpered, pressing against her. I know, baby. I know. Margaret pulled the child close, trying to shield her from the wind. We're going to find somewhere warm, I promise. But as she looked out at the empty street, at the abandoned buildings and dark houses, Margaret had no idea where that somewhere would be. Edgewater had 3 open businesses, a convenience store, a dollar store and a bar, all closed at this hour. The nearest neighbor was Mrs. Patterson 2 houses down, but she was 89 and barely knew what year it was anymore. The nearest shelter was in Millbrook, 12 miles away. They'd never make it on foot in this weather. Come on, sweetheart. Margaret adjusted the bag on her shoulder, took Kayla's hand and started walking. She didn't know where they were going, she just knew they couldn't stay here. Leon and his men were still inside and she didn't trust them not to come back out with worse intentions. The snow was already ankle deep and still falling. Each step was a struggle, Margaret's old knees protesting, her thin slippers soaking through immediately. Kayla walked beside her, silent now, except for the occasional cough that rattled in her small chest. They made it half a block before Margaret realized Kayla was shivering violently. She stopped under a streetlight, knelt down despite the pain in her joints. The child's face was flushed bright red, her eyes glassy. Kayla, baby, look at me. Kayla's gaze was unfocused. Her breathing was coming too fast, too shallow. Margaret pressed her hand to the child's forehead and jerked back. She was burning up. The cold, the stress, the illness that had been building for days, it was all converging at once. No, no, no. Margaret pulled off her own coat, wrapped it around Kayla over the child's smaller coat. Kayla disappeared into the heavy fabric, but at least it was something. Margaret was left in just her thin robe, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was Kayla's fever, about how quickly children could go from sick to critical. She tried to think, tried to make a plan. The free clinic was closed until Monday. The hospital was 15 miles away in the opposite direction from Millbrook. She had no car, no phone, it had been disconnected last month when she couldn't pay the bill. No way to call for help even if help would come. "Grandma," Kayla's voice was so small, "my head hurts." "I know, baby, we're going to get you help. Just stay with me, okay? Stay awake." Margaret picked her up, struggling under the weight. Kayla was small for 4, but Margaret was 72 with bad knees and a worse back. Still she carried her granddaughter, stumbling through the snow, searching desperately for, what? A miracle? A guardian angel? Anyone who would help an old woman and a sick child on a night when the smart thing to do was lock your doors and stay inside. They made it another block, then another. Margaret's arms were screaming. Her lungs burned with cold air, but Kayla was getting heavier, more limp. The fever was raging now. Margaret could feel it through the coats, through everything. "Please," Margaret whispered to the empty street, to God, to anyone who might be listening. "Please, somebody help us." And that's when she saw it. A car, parked under a flickering streetlight, a white Land Rover, expensive and out of place in this neighborhood of broken-down houses and abandoned dreams. Snow was accumulating on the hood, but through the windshield, Margaret could see someone inside. A man young, reading something by the dome light. Margaret stopped, staring at that car like it was a mirage. Every instinct screamed caution. Strange man, expensive car, dangerous neighborhood. Nothing good could come from approaching him. But Kayla made a soft pained sound, and Margaret felt the heat of her fever burning through the coats. She had no choices left, only this one desperate gamble. Margaret stumbled toward the car, her feet numb in her soaked slippers. She reached the driver's side window and raised her hand to knock. Her fingers were so cold she could barely feel them, couldn't make a proper fist. She hit the glass with her palm instead, leaving a mark, hitting again when he didn't immediately respond. The man inside jerked in surprise, looked up from his papers. Even through the snow-covered window, Margaret could see his eyes widen as he took in the sight. An elderly woman in a bathrobe, soaking wet, holding a small child wrapped in coats. He hesitated for just a moment. Margaret saw the calculation in his face, the natural wariness of a stranger confronted with desperation at 2 in the morning. "Please," Margaret said, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the glass. She hit the window again, harder this time. "Please help us. She's sick. She needs help. Please." The window lowered an inch. The man leaned toward it, his face coming into view, maybe 30 years old, exhausted looking, with the kind of features that said he didn't belong in Edgewater. His coat was good quality. His car was expensive. He was clearly just passing through. "Please," Margaret said again, and she heard her own voice breaking. "My granddaughter, she has a high fever. We need help. We need—" She didn't get to finish. Kayla went completely limp in her arms, head lolling back. The child's eyes rolled up, showing only whites. "No!" Margaret's scream cut through the wind. "No, baby, stay with me." The car door flew open. The man was out instantly, reaching for Kayla. "Get in. Back seat. Now." Margaret didn't argue, didn't question. She scrambled into the back seat, her frozen fingers barely able to grip the door handle. The man helped her, lifting Kayla with surprising gentleness, placing her in Margaret's lap before running around to the driver's side. He was in the car in seconds, engine starting, heat blasting. He turned in his seat to look at them. And Margaret saw real concern in his eyes, not the calculated indifference of someone who'd learned to survive by not caring, but genuine alarm. "How high is her fever?" "I don't know. Very high. She's been sick for days, but tonight, the stress, we were thrown out of our home and hospital. We're going to the hospital." He was already pulling out his phone, dialing. "This is, damn it, no signal. Blizzard must have knocked out the towers." He threw the car into gear, pulled onto the empty street. The tires slipped slightly on ice before finding traction. Margaret held Kayla close, feeling the child's fever burning against her chest, watching snow pelt the windshield, as this stranger drove them through the storm. "What's your name?" the man asked, eyes on the road. Margaret Sullivan." This is my granddaughter, Kayla. I'm Nathan Ward. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The hospital in Millbrook is about 20 minutes away. Can you keep her awake until then? I'll try. Margaret stroked Kayla's face, patted her cheeks gently. Kayla, baby, wake up, stay with Grandma. Please stay with Grandma. Kayla's eyes fluttered but didn't open. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Margaret had seen this before, had seen Jeremiah's wife deteriorate just as quickly when she'd had pneumonia, had watched her slip away, despite everything the doctors tried. No, not Kayla, not her granddaughter. She couldn't lose Kayla too. Who threw you out? Nathan's voice was tight with anger. In the middle of a blizzard, with a sick child, the Red Jackals. They're a gang. They said my son owed them money. He died 3 years ago trying to pay them, but they said the debt transferred to me. I couldn't pay, so they took the house, threw us out into the snow. Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not legal. Debt doesn't transfer like that. Legal doesn't matter in Edgewater. They own the police. They own everything. Margaret heard the defeat in her own voice. Nobody stands up to them. Nobody helps. People who try. She swallowed hard. People who try end up disappearing. Well, I'm helping. Nathan's jaw was set, his eyes hard. And I'm not disappearing. Not until Kayla's safe. Not until you both are. Margaret wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust this stranger who'd opened his door when he should have driven away. But trust was dangerous in Edgewater. People learned to survive by looking out for themselves, and anyone who broke that rule usually regretted it. Still, she had no choice. This man, Nathan, was literally her last hope. So Margaret held her granddaughter close, whispered prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening, and watched the snow fall as they drove through the dark toward help she wasn't certain would come in time. In her arms, Kayla's breathing grew more labored, her fever burned like fire, and Margaret wondered if she'd lost everything tonight, her home, her safety, and now, possibly, the last person in the world she loved. Hold on, baby, she whispered. Please hold on, just a little longer. Behind them, Edgewater disappeared into the storm. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was either salvation or the final tragedy of Margaret Sullivan's long hard life. She closed her eyes and prayed for the former. Nathan Ward hadn't planned to be in Edgewater that night. Hell, he hadn't even known Edgewater existed until his GPS had rerouted him off the highway when the blizzard made the main roads impassable. He'd been driving back from a consultation in Pittsburgh, a potential partnership with a healthcare nonprofit that would have expanded his family's clinic network across 3 counties. The meeting had gone well, the contract was promising. Nathan's father would finally have to acknowledge that his youngest son's charity work could actually be financially sustainable. Everything had been on track for Nathan to return to his apartment in Millbrook, review the paperwork, and call his father with good news for once. Then the blizzard hit, and the GPS directed him through Edgewater, and he'd pulled over to check his route because the streets looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic film. Abandoned buildings, broken windows, not a single light on in half the houses. It was 2 in the morning in a dying town, and Nathan had been sitting in his car, wondering if he should risk continuing or just sleep there until morning. That's when an old woman had materialized out of the snow like a ghost, pounding on his window with a sick child in her arms. Now 20 minutes later, Nathan was breaking at least 3 traffic laws trying to get them to Millbrook General before the child, Kayla, her name was Kayla, stopped breathing entirely. Talk to me, Margaret, Nathan said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. How's she doing? Still breathing, but barely. Margaret's voice was thin with fear. She's so hot, I've never felt a fever this high. Nathan pressed harder on the accelerator. The Land Rover's all-wheel drive was the only reason they were making any progress at all. The roads were buried under 6 inches of fresh snow, with more falling every second. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. Every intersection was a gamble. But Nathan had grown up in upstate New York, had learned to drive in conditions like this, and more importantly, he had a sick child in his back seat who would die if he didn't get her to a hospital soon. His phone sat uselessly in the cup holder. No signal, no way to call ahead, to warn the ER they were coming. He'd just have to get there and hope they were staffed adequately for a blizzard night. Tell me about her, Nathan said, partly to keep Margaret talking. partly because he needed to know what he was dealing with. What symptoms has she been showing? How long has she been sick? Started with a cold about a week ago, runny nose cough, nothing serious, but the cough got worse, deeper. She started running a low fever 3 days ago. The free clinic gave her medicine, but it ran out and Margaret's voice broke. I couldn't afford more. I was waiting for my social security check. I thought she'd be okay until then. Nathan bit back his anger. Not at Margaret, she'd done what she could with nothing. His anger was at a system that let children go without medicine because their guardians couldn't afford $40 for antibiotics. At a country that claimed to be the wealthiest in the world while old women on fixed incomes had to choose between heating and medication. You did everything right, Nathan said firmly. You kept her warm, you gave her what medicine you had. This isn't your fault, then why does it feel like it is? Margaret was crying now, silent tears that Nathan could see glistening on her face in the rearview mirror. I failed Jeremiah. I couldn't save him from the drugs, from the debt, from working himself to death. And now Kayla's going to be fine. Nathan put every ounce of conviction he had into those words, even though he had no idea if they were true. We're going to get her to the hospital. They're going to treat her. She's going to be okay. He hoped to God he was right. The Millbrook General Hospital sign finally appeared through the snow, a beacon of light in the darkness. Nathan pulled into the emergency entrance, not bothering to find a proper parking spot. He threw the car into park, killed the engine, and was out of the vehicle before Margaret could even process what was happening. He opened the back door, reached for Kayla. Let me carry her. You follow right behind me. Margaret released the child reluctantly. Nathan scooped Kayla up, shocked by how light she was, how small. Her skin was burning through his shirt, her breathing was rapid and shallow. This wasn't just a cold that had gotten worse. This was serious, possibly pneumonia, possibly worse. He ran for the emergency entrance, Margaret struggling to keep up behind him. The automatic doors opened with a whoosh of warm air. The ER was quiet. Just a handful of people in the waiting area, one nurse at the triage desk. I need help. Nathan's voice cut through the quiet. 4-year-old female, high fever, difficulty breathing, possible pneumonia. The nurse was up immediately, calling for assistance. Within seconds a doctor appeared. Young woman, dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp and focused. She took one look at Kayla and started barking orders. Treatment room 2. Get me vitals, oxygen, IV access, someone page respiratory. They took Kayla from Nathan's arms, and suddenly he was standing there empty-handed, watching as they carried the child through doors marked, staff only. Margaret caught up, breathing hard, her face pale. Where are they taking her? To treat her. She's in good hands now. Nathan guided Margaret to a chair in the waiting area. Sit, catch your breath. You look like you're about to collapse. Margaret sat, but her eyes never left the doors where Kayla had disappeared. I can't lose her, she whispered. She's all I have left. Nathan sat beside her, and for the first time, he really looked at this woman he'd picked up off the street. She was probably in her early 70s, thin in a way that spoke of not enough food rather than genetics. Her robe was threadbare, her slippers falling apart. Her hands were raw and chapped from years of hard work and harder poverty. And she'd just been thrown out of her home in the middle of a blizzard by criminals who thought an old woman and a sick child were acceptable collateral for a dead man's debt. Nathan felt rage building in his chest, not the hot immediate kind, but the cold, purposeful kind that said something needed to be done about this. Tell me about the Red Jackals, he said quietly. Everything you know. Margaret looked at him with exhausted eyes. Why? Because what they did to you is illegal. Criminal, and somebody needs to stop them. People have tried. People disappear. Margaret shook her head. I appreciate you helping us. Really I do, but the best thing you can do now is leave. Go back to wherever you're from. Forget you ever came to Edgewater. I'm from Millbrook, 20 minutes away. Nathan leaned forward. And I'm not leaving. Not until this is handled. You don't understand. The Red Jackals aren't just thugs. They're organized, connected. They have police on their payroll, county officials. You can't fight them through legal channels, because they control the legal channels. Then we fight them another way. Nathan pulled out his phone, still no signal, but he had plenty of contacts stored. I run a community health clinic, my family's clinic. We serve people who can't afford traditional health care. We don't have a lot of resources, but we have some. And I know people, lawyers, social workers, law enforcement who aren't corrupt. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Nathan thought about how to answer that, about his mother, who died when he was 16 because she couldn't afford the cancer treatment that might have saved her, about how his father had thrown himself into building the clinic network afterward, creating something that would help other families avoid what they'd gone through, about how Nathan had joined that work because he genuinely believed healthcare was a human right, not a privilege for those who could pay. Because it's right, he said simply. Because you and Kayla deserve better than what happened tonight. Because the Red Jackals need to be stopped before they hurt more people. Pick whatever reason makes sense to you. They're all true. Margaret studied him for a long moment. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Nathan managed a small smile. My father would definitely say foolish. Before Margaret could respond, the doctor who'd taken Kayla reappeared. Nathan and Margaret both stood immediately. She's stable, the doctor said, and Margaret sagged with relief. We've got her on oxygen and IV fluids. Her temperature was 104 when she came in. Extremely dangerous, especially for a child her age. We're bringing it down with medication and cool compresses. The X-ray shows she has pneumonia in both lungs. We're starting her on aggressive antibiotic treatment. Will she be okay? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. She's going to be fine. But another hour, maybe 2, and this could have been a very different conversation. You got her here just in time. The doctor looked at Nathan. Good call bringing her straight in. Can we see her? Nathan asked. In a few minutes, we need to get her settled and make sure she's responding to treatment. Someone will come get you. The doctor paused. I do need to ask, given the severity of her condition and the circumstances you arrived in, is there any reason to believe this child has been neglected or abused? No, Margaret said immediately. I've been caring for her. I give her everything I have. We were thrown out of our house tonight by criminals, but I would never. She's telling the truth. Nathan interjected. I witnessed part of what happened. This is a case of predatory debt collection, not neglect. Margaret has been doing everything she can with very limited resources. The doctor nodded slowly. Okay. I still need to file a report. It's mandatory for cases like this, but I'll note the circumstances. Someone from social services will probably want to talk to you both. After the doctor left, Margaret sank back into her chair, suddenly looking far older than she had an hour ago. Her shoulders slumped, her hands trembled in her lap, and fear clouded her eyes. Social services, she whispered. They're going to take her away. They'll say I can't take care of her properly. No, they won't, Nathan said firmly, sitting beside her. Because you're not going to be homeless, and you're not going to be without support. I'm going to make sure of that. She looked at him, desperate. How? First, you need somewhere safe, he said. Warm. With food. A place where Kayla can recover. He paused only briefly before deciding. I know a small hotel near my clinic. Good people run it. I'll get you a room there and cover the cost until we figure out something permanent. Margaret shook her head. I can't accept charity. This isn't charity, Nathan replied gently. It's basic human decency. And honestly, Margaret, you don't have many options right now. So please, let me help. Tears filled her eyes. Why are you doing this? Nathan's voice roughened. Because someone should have helped my mother. Because too many people suffer alone when they shouldn't. And because I can help. That's reason enough. They sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them, until a nurse appeared with a soft smile. You can see Kayla now. She's awake and asking for her grandma. Margaret was on her feet instantly. Nathan followed a few steps behind, giving her space but staying close. Kayla lay in a pediatric room, her small body swallowed by a bed far too big for her. Oxygen tubes rested beneath her nose, an IV taped to her arm, but her eyes were open, clearer now. When she saw Margaret, she reached out. Grandma. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Margaret kissed her forehead. You're going to be just fine. Where are we? At the hospital. You got very sick, but they're helping you. Kayla's gaze shifted to Nathan in the doorway. Who's that? That's Mr. Nathan. Margaret said softly. He helped us. Kayla studied him seriously. Thank you for helping my grandma. Nathan swallowed. You're welcome, Kayla. I'm glad I was there. Are you a doctor? Not exactly. I help run a clinic. That's good, she murmured. Grandma says we can't usually afford doctors. Margaret flushed, but Nathan smiled. You can afford this one. We'll make sure you get whatever care you need. Kayla nodded, eyelids drooping. Then she whispered, Did the bad men take our house? Nathan crouched to her level. They did something very wrong, but we're going to fix it. You and your grandma will have somewhere safe. Okay. Her eyes closed. I'm tired. Sleep, sweetheart, Margaret said, holding her hand. They stayed as Kayla drifted off, her breathing already easier. Nathan watched Margaret stroke the child's fingers and thought of the countless families he'd seen struggling, crushed by systems designed to ignore them. Not this time. He stepped into the hallway, pacing until he finally found a signal near the lobby doors. He called his assistant. Nathan. Jessica answered groggily. I need emergency housing, he said. 2 people. Elderly woman and a 4-year-old, near the clinic. Bill it to the discretionary fund. How long? Start with 2 weeks, and what's going on? Predatory debt collectors threw them into a blizzard. The child nearly died. I'm not letting this stand, Jessica exhaled. Your father won't like this. He can deal with it, Nathan said. Also get me contact info for Rebecca Wilson, the tenant rights attorney. After hanging up, Nathan stood still, knowing he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Taking on the Red Jackals would be dangerous. But someone had to say enough. When he returned, Margaret was slumped beside Kayla's bed. He placed a blanket over her shoulders. You're still here, she murmured. Of course. Most people would have left. I'm not most people. He sat beside her. I've arranged housing, and next we fight. Her eyes widened. If I fight them, they'll come after us. They will anyway. The only safety is making sure they can't hurt anyone again. She watched Kayla breathe, thinking of everything she'd lost, and almost lost again. My son used to say the hardest part of being brave was choosing to step forward. She said quietly. Tonight I almost lost my granddaughter, because I kept stepping back. Nathan met her gaze. I'll fight, Margaret said. I'll testify. For my son. For Kayla. For every family they've hurt. Relief settled into Nathan's chest. Then we do this together, he said, extending his hand. She shook it. Together. Outside, the blizzard howled. But inside that hospital room, 2 strangers formed an alliance that would change everything. The Red Jackals would answer for what they'd done. Kayla was released from the hospital 3 days later. The pneumonia had responded well to antibiotics, her fever had broken, and the doctors were confident she'd make a full recovery with continued rest and medication. Nathan picked them up in his Land Rover, now equipped with spare winter clothes he'd purchased, plus a booster seat for Kayla that the hospital social worker had provided. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Moore, had interviewed both Margaret and Nathan separately, taking detailed statements about what had happened the night of the eviction. Nathan had expected judgment, maybe even an attempt to remove Kayla from Margaret's custody. Instead, Patricia had looked at Margaret with sympathy that came from years of seeing good people destroyed by bad systems. You did everything right, Patricia had told Margaret. You kept her warm, sought help immediately, made sure she got treatment. The fact that you were put in an impossible situation doesn't make you a bad guardian. It makes you a victim of a crime. Still, Patricia had filed a report with law enforcement, as required. And that report had made its way to the Edgewater Police Department, which meant the Red Jackals now knew that Margaret had talked to authorities. They'll be looking for us, Margaret said quietly as Nathan drove them toward the hotel he'd arranged. She was in the back seat with Kayla, who was bundled in a new winter coat and looking around with curious eyes. Leon and his people, they'll want to make sure I don't cause more trouble. Which is why you're not going back to Edgewater. Not yet. Nathan caught her eye in the rearview mirror. The hotel is in Millbrook. Different jurisdiction. And I've taken some precautions. What kind of precautions? You'll see. The Beacon Suites was a modest extended-stay hotel on the edge of Millbrook's downtown. Nothing fancy but clean and well-maintained. Nathan had stayed there himself once, years ago, when his apartment flooded and needed extensive repairs. He knew the owner, Rita Alonso, who'd escaped an abusive marriage herself, and had strong feelings about helping women and children in crisis. Rita was waiting in the lobby when they arrived, her round face creasing into a warm smile. "You must be Margaret and Kayla. Nathan told me you'd be coming. Welcome." She led them to a suite on the second floor, small but comfortable, with a separate bedroom for Kayla, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with a tub. Rita had stocked the refrigerator with basic groceries, and there were fresh towels in the bathroom and extra blankets in the closet. "You need anything at all, you call down to the desk. I'm here most days, and my staff knows to take care of you." Rita handed Margaret a key card. "This floor has extra security. Camera at the stairwell, camera at the elevator. Nobody gets up here without being logged." Margaret looked overwhelmed. "I can't, this is too much, I can't pay for this." "You're not paying, Nathan is." And before you argue, Rita held up a hand. "Let me tell you something. 10 years ago, I was where you are. Different circumstances, but same feeling, trapped, scared, nowhere safe to go. Someone helped me. Gave me a place to stay, no questions asked, no payment required. They told me to pay it forward someday when I could. So this isn't charity, Margaret. This is me paying forward a debt I owe to a stranger who saved my life." Tears filled Margaret's eyes. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just rest, heal, take care of that beautiful granddaughter." Rita squeezed her shoulder, then left them alone. Kayla was already exploring, opening cabinets, checking out the bedroom. "Grandma, there's a TV, and look," she held up a stuffed sunflower someone had left on the bed. "It's just like the flowers you used to grow." "That's lovely, baby." Margaret turned to Nathan, who was still standing in the doorway. "You arranged all this, the room, the food, the security." "Rita arranged the security. I just made sure you had somewhere safe to be while we figure out next steps. Which are, first you rest, you've been through hell. Kayla needs you healthy and strong. And second," Nathan pulled a business card from his wallet, handed it to her. "Second, you meet with this woman, Rebecca Wilson. She's an attorney who specializes in predatory lending and tenant rights. I've already briefed her on your situation. She wants to hear your full story and see what legal options exist." Margaret looked at the card. "I can't afford a lawyer. Rebecca works pro bono for cases like this. You won't pay anything." Nathan paused. "Margaret, I know you're used to doing everything yourself, used to not asking for help. But you're not alone anymore. You have people in your corner. Let us help. I don't understand why you're doing this. You don't even know us. I'm doing it because it's right, that's all the reason I need." Nathan headed for the door, then turned back. "Get some rest. I'll check in tomorrow. If you need anything before then, call me. My number's on that card too." After he left, Margaret stood in the middle of the suite, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 3 days. They'd lost their home, nearly lost Kayla, and now they were in a safe, warm place with food and security, and people who wanted to help. It felt like a dream, or a trick. Margaret had lived 72 years learning that nothing came without strings attached, that kindness was usually just another way of controlling people. But Nathan Ward didn't seem to want control. He seemed to genuinely want to help. And God, Margaret was so tired of being suspicious, so tired of fighting alone. "Grandma." Kayla appeared in the bedroom doorway, the stuffed sunflower clutched to her chest. "Is this our home now? For a little while, baby. Until we can go back to our real home. Will the bad men let us go back?" Margaret thought about lying, about protecting Kayla from hard truths, but children deserved honesty, even when the truth was scary. "I don't know," Margaret admitted. "But Nathan is going to help us try. And there's a lawyer, a woman who helps people like us. We're going to fight to get our home back. What if we can't? Then we'll find a new home. Somewhere safe, somewhere the bad men can't reach us." Margaret pulled Kayla into a hug. "The important thing is we're together, As long as we have each other, we're going to be okay. Kayla nodded against her chest. I like Mr. Nathan, he's nice. Not scary like the bad men. He is nice, Margaret agreed. And maybe just maybe he was also their way out of this nightmare. Nathan Ward sat in his office at the Ward Community Clinic, reviewing the information Jessica had compiled about the Red Jackals. It wasn't good. The gang had been operating in Edgewater for approximately 8 years, moving in after the last factory closed, and the town's economy collapsed. They specialized in predatory lending, offering loans to desperate people at exorbitant interest rates, then collecting debts through intimidation, violence, and property seizure. Local law enforcement had done nothing. Several officers were suspected of being on the gang's payroll. The county prosecutor had declined to bring charges in multiple cases, citing insufficient evidence. But the most disturbing discovery was this: the Red Jackals weren't independent, they were foot soldiers for someone bigger, someone with money, influence, and the kind of protection that kept authorities from investigating too closely. The name that kept appearing in Jessica's research was Morgan Hale, a wealthy investor who'd bought up significant portions of Edgewater's real estate at rock-bottom prices over the past 5 years. On paper, Hale was a legitimate businessman. In reality, he was using the Red Jackals to force people from their homes, so he could buy the properties for pennies on the dollar. It was systematic exploitation, a business model built on human suffering, and it had been going on for years without anyone stopping it. Nathan's phone rang. It was Rebecca Wilson. I've reviewed what you sent, she said without greeting. It's bad, really bad. The Red Jackals have been operating unchecked for years. Witnesses are terrified. Evidence disappears. And Morgan Hale has money and connections that make any legal fight extremely difficult. So we can't fight them? Nathan asked. I didn't say that. Rebecca replied. I said it's difficult. There's a difference. She paused. If Margaret is willing to go fully on record, formal deposition, court testimony, then we have a chance. Her case is especially severe, forcing an elderly woman and a sick child out into a blizzard. That's criminal negligence, possibly attempted manslaughter, if we can prove they knew the child was ill. Can we prove that? We can try. Hospital records show the child was treated at the free clinic 3 days before the eviction. If the Red Jackals were watching the house, and they usually are, then they knew. That means they knowingly endangered a child. A spark of hope flared in Nathan's chest. What do you need from Margaret? Everything, Rebecca said. A full statement, details about her son's debt, any paperwork, loan agreements, payment records, anything proving the debt was illegal, and names of other families they targeted. Patterns matter. I'll arrange a meeting. Tomorrow if she's ready. Rebecca's tone sharpened. But Nathan, you need to understand what this means. Once she goes on record, she becomes a target. They will intimidate her, possibly hurt her. You need security. She's already in a secure hotel, Nathan said. I'll make sure she's protected. Good, because men like Morgan Hale don't go down quietly. After the call, Nathan leaned back in his chair. He was committed now. He'd promised Margaret they'd fight, promised the child they'd get their home back. And Nathan didn't make promises he couldn't keep. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop interfering. This is your only warning. Nathan stared at the screen. They'd found him already. Fear should have followed. Doubt. Second thoughts. Instead his resolve hardened. If they were threatening him, it meant they were worried. Good. Let them be. He deleted the message and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't dialed in years. Jack McKinley. Jack, Nathan said when the call connected. It's Nathan. I need your help. Jack McKinley was a former police detective forced into early retirement after refusing to ignore corruption. Now he ran a private security firm, protecting witnesses and investigating cases law enforcement wouldn't touch. Been a while, Jack said. What's going on? Nathan laid it all out, the eviction, the child, the Red Jackals, Morgan Hale. When he finished, Jack was silent. You're talking about organized crime with deep local connections, Jack said finally. You know that, right? I do. And you're willing to risk yourself for an old woman and a kid you met 3 days ago? Yes. Jack let out a short laugh. You're either brave or stupid. That's what everyone keeps saying. All right, Jack said. I'm in. I'll get security on the grandmother and the kid, round the clock, and I'll start digging into Hale's operation. But this won't be fast. We might not have time. They know she talked. Then security comes first. I'll have someone at that hotel tonight. Nobody gets near them. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Jack replied. Thank me when this is over, and everyone's still alive. When the call ended, Nathan sat alone as dusk settled outside his office window. Snow drifted down in slow, quiet sheets. Somewhere across town, an elderly woman and a child were sleeping safely for the first time in days, and elsewhere in Edgewater, families were still trapped, silent, afraid, waiting for someone to fight back. One family at a time, Nathan thought. That's how systems break. That's how change starts. He stood feeling the weight of what he'd chosen, but also the certainty. Nathan Ward was going to help that woman get her home back. He was going to get justice for her dead son, and if Morgan Hale and the Red Jackals wanted to stop him, they were welcome to try. Margaret met with Rebecca Wilson 4 days after checking into the Beacon Suites. The attorney arrived at the hotel in a sensible gray sedan, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression that was equal parts compassion and steel. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Rebecca Wilson. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Margaret led her into the suite's small living area. Kayla was in the bedroom playing with a set of blocks Nathan had brought by yesterday. The security guard Jack McKinley had assigned, a quiet woman named Hannah Garcia, who looked like she could break someone in half without blinking, stood discreetly near the window. Rebecca spent 3 hours taking Margaret's statement, recording everything on a digital recorder, while simultaneously taking notes. She asked detailed questions about the night of the eviction, about Jeremiah's debt, about every interaction Margaret had had with the Red Jackals over the past 3 years. You mentioned Jeremiah took out the original loan 3 years ago, Rebecca said, reviewing her notes. Do you have any documentation? Loan agreement, payment records, anything in writing? I have some papers Jeremiah left. I grabbed them when Leon gave me 5 minutes to pack. Margaret retrieved the folder she'd brought from the house, wrinkled, water-stained from the snow, but mostly intact. It's not much. Rebecca spread the documents on the table, examining each one carefully. Her expression grew darker with every page. This is incredibly helpful. This loan agreement, she tapped one of the papers, lists an interest rate of 35%. That's illegal in Pennsylvania. Maximum allowable is 6% for consumer loans. Everything above that is usury. I told Jeremiah it seemed wrong, but he was desperate. The bank had turned him down. He needed money for Margaret's voice caught, for bail. After he got arrested for possession, he thought if he could just get out, get clean, everything would be okay. And the loan came from a man named Carter. First name or last I don't know. He worked out of a check-cashing place on Maple Street. Jeremiah said Carter was connected, that he could get money fast with no questions asked. Rebecca made notes. And after Jeremiah died, when did the Red Jackals first contact you? About a month later, Leon Vance showed up at my door, said the debt had transferred to me. I told him I didn't have any money. He said I had the house, could sign it over to settle the debt, which you refused. Of course I refused. That house is all Kayla has, all I have. Jeremiah died trying to keep it. Margaret's hands clenched. I wasn't going to just give it away. So they escalated. Rebecca pulled out more documents, records she'd obtained from the county. In the past 3 years 23 properties in Edgewater have been transferred to shell companies linked to Morgan Hale. All of them followed the same pattern. Owner falls behind on debt. Red Jackals apply pressure. Owner either signs over the property, or leaves town. Your house was next in line. So this isn't about the money, it's about the land. Exactly. Morgan Hale is systematically buying up Edgewater at pennies on the dollar. In 5 years he'll own most of the town. He'll be able to redevelop it however he wants, and the people who've lived there for generations will have been pushed out through intimidation and violence. Margaret felt sick. How many families, that we know about? 23. How many more who gave up and left without fighting? We don't know.
could be dozens, could be more. We have to stop them. We're going to try. Rebecca leaned forward. But Margaret, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. If you agree to testify, and I mean really testify, formal deposition, potentially a trial, you'll be putting yourself in danger. The Red Jackals will see you as a threat. Morgan Hale has resources to make your life very difficult. More difficult than losing my home and almost losing my granddaughter. Different kind of difficult. Legal harassment, surveillance, possible threats. Nathan has arranged security which helps, but there are no guarantees. Margaret thought about Kayla in the next room, playing happily for the first time in days. Thought about Jeremiah, worked to death trying to pay a debt he'd never escape. Thought about all the other families the Red Jackals had destroyed. I'll do it, Margaret said firmly. I'll testify. I'll give depositions, whatever you need. But I want justice. Not just for me, for everyone they've hurt. Rebecca smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because you're not just fighting for your house anymore, Margaret. You're going to be the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit against Morgan Hale and his criminal enterprise. If we can get other victims to come forward, and I think we can, once they see someone's actually fighting back, we can take down his entire operation. How long will it take? Months, maybe a year. These cases are complex and Hale has expensive lawyers who'll file every motion they can to delay, but will win. The evidence is too strong. The pattern is too clear. After Rebecca left, Margaret sat alone in the quiet suite, processing everything. A class action lawsuit. Months of legal proceedings. Becoming the face of resistance against the Red Jackals. It was terrifying, and necessary. And maybe, just maybe, her chance to turn Jeremiah's death into something meaningful.
Nathan arrived an hour later bringing dinner from a local Chinese restaurant. He'd been coming by every evening, making sure they had food, checking on Kayla's recovery, becoming a fixture in their temporary lives. Rebecca called, Nathan said as they unpacked the food. Said you agreed to be lead plaintiff. That's brave. Or stupid. Seems to be a fine line. Nathan smiled. You're in good company then. Jack says the whole situation is insane and we're probably all going to regret it. But he's still helping. Jack's the security man. Former detective. Got forced out because he wouldn't take bribes from people like Morgan Hale. Now he investigates cases the police won't touch. How many people are you pulling into this? As many as it takes. Nathan handed her a plate. Eat, you need your strength. Kayla emerged from the bedroom, drawn by the smell of food. Is that egg rolls? Yes ma'am, and orange chicken. Your grandma said you like that. Kayla climbed onto a chair, smiling wide. After just 4 days of warmth, food and medicine, the change was unmistakable. Color had returned to her face, her energy was back. The cough that once rattled her chest was nearly gone. She looked like a normal 4-year-old again, not a child hovering on the edge of crisis. Mr. Nathan, she asked between bites of rice, are you going to catch the bad men? Nathan smiled softly. I'm going to try, with your grandma's help, and some people who are very good at catching bad men. What happens when you catch them? They go to jail, and you and your grandma get to go home. Promise? Nathan glanced at Margaret and saw her slight nod. I promise. It might take time, but you'll be safe. Satisfied, Kayla returned to her food. Margaret watched Nathan quietly, seeing the weight he carried, the responsibility he'd taken on for 2 people who had been strangers days ago. She wanted to tell him he didn't have to do this, but she knew the truth. Without him they wouldn't be okay, and somehow he knew that too. Later, after Kayla was asleep, Margaret and Nathan sat together drinking tea while snow drifted past the window. Tell me about your mother, Margaret said gently. Nathan was silent for a moment. She had breast cancer. We caught it too late. We couldn't afford regular checkups. By the time the symptoms were obvious, it had spread. He stared into his cup. The treatment that might have saved her wasn't covered. It cost more than we could ever afford. I'm sorry, Margaret said. My father tried everything, Nathan continued. Loans, mortgaging the house. He built the clinic network to honor her, and to make sure other families wouldn't have to choose between bankruptcy and watching someone die. His voice tightened. I watched my mother fade, knowing help existed but was out of reach. When I saw you and Kayla that night, I couldn't drive past. Margaret reached over and squeezed his hand. Your mother raised a good man. My father thinks caring is weakness. Nathan said quietly, he's wrong. Margaret replied, it's the strongest thing there is. They sat in silence until Nathan's phone buzzed. He frowned. Trouble? Margaret asked. Jack wants to meet tomorrow. Says he's found something important about Morgan Hale. Good or bad? He didn't say. Nathan stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start building the case against the Red Jackals. After he left, Margaret checked on Kayla, sleeping peacefully, clutching her stuffed sunflower, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not fragile or desperate, but real, solid, the kind that comes from knowing you're no longer alone. She slipped into bed, wrapped herself in warm blankets, and slept better than she had in 3 years. Jack McKinley's office was in a converted warehouse in Millbrook's industrial district, all exposed brick and metal beams with security cameras covering every angle. Nathan arrived to find Jack waiting with a woman he didn't recognize, late 40s, sharp eyes, dressed in a way that said federal agent even without the badge. Nathan Ward, this is Agent Patricia Martinez, FBI. Jack gestured to the empty chairs. She's been investigating Morgan Hale for the past 18 months. Nathan shook her hand, trying to process this development. FBI, for debt collection. For racketeering, Martinez corrected. Debt collection is just one piece. Hale runs a criminal enterprise that includes predatory lending, real estate fraud, witness intimidation, and suspected connections to at least 2 disappearances. She pulled out a thick file. Your Margaret Sullivan is exactly the kind of victim we need to build a federal case. Nathan sat down slowly. You've known about Hale for 18 months. Why hasn't he been arrested? Because knowing and proving are different things. Hale insulates himself carefully, uses the Red Jackals as muscle so his hands stay clean, has lawyers who challenge every subpoena, every warrant. We've been building a case, but we need witnesses, living, breathing people willing to testify. And until now, every potential witness has been too scared to come forward, or has disappeared before we could get their statement. What changed? You did. Martinez opened the file, showing photographs of Margaret and Kayla leaving the hospital. Someone's been watching the Beacon Suites, logging your visits. They photographed you, Mrs. Sullivan, the child. They know you're helping her fight back. Nathan felt cold. They're surveilling us? They were. We've identified the surveillance team and are monitoring them now, which means they're worried, which means we're on the right track. Martinez pulled out more documents. Jack's investigation turned up something interesting. Morgan Hale doesn't just own shell companies buying Edgewater real estate. He also owns the company that employs most of the Red Jackals as security consultants. It's direct connection. If we can prove he ordered the eviction, the intimidation, we've got him on RICO charges. Can you prove it? With Margaret's testimony and corroborating evidence, yes, but we need more. We need other victims willing to come forward. We need financial records showing money flowing from Hale to the Red Jackals. We need wiretaps, surveillance, everything that builds an ironclad case. Nathan thought about Margaret, about the weight she was already carrying. How long? 3 to 6 months if we move fast. But Nathan Martinez leaned forward. You need to understand the danger you're all in. Morgan Hale has operated with impunity for years. He's not going to let one old woman take him down without a fight. The Red Jackals will escalate. We have security, which helps, but security can only do so much. You need to prepare Mrs. Sullivan for what's coming. Make sure she understands the risks. After the meeting, Nathan drove to the Beacon Suites with a leaden weight in his stomach. He'd promised Margaret they'd fight the Red Jackals, get her home back, find justice for Jeremiah. But he hadn't fully understood what that fight would entail. The danger, the length, the toll it would take on everyone involved. He found Margaret in the suite's living area, working on a puzzle with Kayla. Hannah Garcia stood by the window, her presence now a constant fixture. Margaret looked up when Nathan entered, and immediately her expression shifted to concern. What's wrong? Nathan waited until Kayla was back in the bedroom, then explained everything. The FBI investigation, Martinez's involvement, the surveillance, the timeline, the risks. Margaret listened in silence, her face growing more drawn with each revelation. When Nathan finished, she walked to the window, staring out at the snowy street below. I put us in danger, she said quietly.
by fighting back, by not just accepting what happened. No. Nathan joined her at the window. The Red Jackals put you in danger. Morgan Hale put you in danger. You're just refusing to let them get away with it. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now Kayla's safe. We have this room. We have food. We could just stay here, disappear, start over somewhere else. That would be safer than fighting. It would also mean they win, that every family after yours gets destroyed the same way, that Jeremiah died for nothing, that men like Morgan Hale can do whatever they want because people are too scared to stop them. I'm scared, Margaret admitted. I'm terrified, for Kayla, for myself, for you, because you've made yourself a target by helping us. Being scared is normal. Being scared doesn't mean you give up. It means you're smart enough to understand the risks and brave enough to face them anyway. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then tell me honestly, can we win? Can we actually take down Morgan Hale? The FBI thinks we can. Rebecca thinks we can. I think we can. But it's going to take time, and courage, and willingness to see this through even when it gets hard. And if something happens to me, if the Red Jackals, they won't touch you. We have security. The FBI is watching, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you or Kayla. I promise. Margaret turned to face him. You can't promise that. You're not invincible. No, but I'm determined. And so are the people helping us. We're not giving up on this, Margaret. The question is whether you're ready to keep fighting. Margaret looked toward the bedroom, where Kayla was singing softly to herself. Thought about Jeremiah. Thought about the house she'd lived in for 40 years. Thought about all the other families suffering under the Red Jackal's control. I'm ready, she said finally. Tell Agent Martinez I'll cooperate fully. I'll give testimony. I'll do whatever she needs. But Nathan, she gripped his arm. If anything happens to me, promise me Kayla will be taken care of. Promise me she won't end up in the system, bouncing between foster homes. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway. Nathan looked into her desperate, pleading eyes and made a promise he hoped he wouldn't have to keep. If something happens, Kayla will be safe. I give you my word. Margaret sagged with relief. Okay, then let's do this. Let's take down Morgan Hale and make sure he never hurts another family. Over the next 6 weeks the investigation gained momentum. Agent Martinez brought in a full FBI team. Analysts combing through financial records, agents conducting surveillance on Red Jackal's members, prosecutors building the framework for a RICO case. Margaret gave a formal deposition that lasted 4 hours, detailing everything she knew about the debt, the eviction, the Red Jackal's operation. Rebecca Wilson filed a civil lawsuit on her behalf, formally challenging the property seizure and demanding return of the house plus damages. And slowly, tentatively, other victims started coming forward. First was a man named Robert Torres, whose small grocery store had been burned down after he couldn't pay protection money. Then Sandra Holloway, who'd lost her family's home the same way Margaret had. Then more, a steady trickle of people who'd been silent for years, watching Margaret fight and finding their own courage. Within 6 weeks they had 12 families willing to testify. 12 stories of intimidation, violence and theft. 12 pieces of evidence pointing directly at Morgan Hale. The Red Jackals noticed, started pushing back. Cars followed Nathan when he drove to work. His clinic received threatening phone calls. Someone threw a brick through Rebecca Wilson's office window. Sandra Holloway found her tires slashed, but nobody backed down. If anything, the intimidation made people angrier, more determined. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about refusing to live in fear, about saying enough. Nathan sat in his office late one evening, reviewing security reports, when his phone rang. His father. I heard you're building a case against Morgan Hale. Harrison Ward said without preamble. Are you insane? Nice to hear from you too, Dad. Don't be flippant. Do you have any idea what you're risking? Hale has connections all over this county. He could destroy the clinic, could destroy you personally. All for what? An old woman you barely know. For 12 families who've been victimized by a criminal enterprise. For basic justice. For doing the right thing even when it's hard. The right thing, Harrison's voice rose. The right thing is protecting what we've built. The clinic helps thousands of people. You're going to throw that away for a crusade against a man you can't beat. I can beat him. The FBI can beat him. With enough evidence and enough courage, we can take him down. And when he retaliates, when he comes after the clinic, after our family, after everyone you care about, what then? Then we deal with it. Dad, I understand you're worried, but this is what the clinic is supposed to be about, helping people who have nowhere else to turn. Margaret Sullivan had nowhere else to turn. Neither did the other 11 families. If we don't help them, who will? Harrison was silent for a long moment. You're just like your mother, stubborn, idealistic, convinced you can save everyone, and you loved her for it. I loved her. I also watched her die because of a broken system we couldn't fix. I don't want to watch you get destroyed trying to fix a different broken system. I'm not getting destroyed. I'm fighting. There's a difference. After his father hung up, Nathan sat in the dark office, wondering if Harrison was right, if he was being recklessly idealistic, if he'd put everyone he cared about in danger for a cause he might not win. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Kayla drew you a picture, says you're her hero. Wanted to say thank you for everything. Below the text was a photo, a child's drawing of 3 people holding hands. One tall, one medium, one small, hearts and stars surrounding them. Stick figure family. Nathan saved the image to his phone and felt his resolve harden. This was why he was fighting. For families like Margaret and Kayla, for the chance to be part of something that mattered more than safety or comfort or his father's approval. He pulled up Agent Martinez's number, sent a text status update. The response came immediately. Close. 2 more weeks and we file charges. Stay vigilant. 2 more weeks. Nathan could manage 2 more weeks, and then Morgan Hale would finally answer for what he'd done. Leon Vance was arrested on a Wednesday morning while eating breakfast at a diner in Edgewater. FBI agents surrounded him before he could reach for the gun he kept under his jacket. He was charged with extortion, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. Nathan watched the news coverage from his office, feeling a surge of satisfaction. This was real progress. With Leon in custody and potentially willing to cooperate to reduce his sentence, they had direct connection to Morgan Hale's operation. But satisfaction quickly turned to concern when Agent Martinez called 2 hours later. We've got a problem. Leon made bail. How? You said the charges were serious. They are. But Hale's lawyers argued he wasn't a flight risk, had no prior convictions, family in the area. Judge set bail at $500,000. It was posted within the hour. Nathan felt ice in his veins. He's out already. And he knows Margaret's testimony is what triggered his arrest. Nathan, you need to increase security immediately. Don't let Mrs. Sullivan or Kayla out of that hotel for any reason. We're working on getting Leon back in custody on additional charges, but until then he's a significant threat. Nathan called Jack immediately. Within an hour, Hannah Garcia was joined by a second guard, a former military man named David Lopez who looked like he could fight off a small army. The hotel's security was upgraded. Additional cameras installed, a panic button placed in Margaret's suite. We're going into lockdown, Jack told them during an emergency meeting at the hotel. Nobody leaves this floor without escort. All meals delivered. No visitors except Nathan, Rebecca, and law enforcement. And if you see anything at all that seems wrong, you hit that panic button. Clear, Margaret nodded, pulling Kayla close. The child had been picking up on the tension, becoming clingy and fearful again. The progress they'd made was unraveling. Nathan stayed that night, sleeping on the suite's couch despite Margaret's protests. He told himself it was to provide additional security. The truth was he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. The next day passed in tense quiet. Then another. Jack's team tracked Leon's movements. He'd returned to his apartment, hadn't left. The FBI maintained surveillance. Everything seemed under control. On Saturday evening, 3 days after Leon's release, Margaret finally started to relax. Maybe he's smart enough to know he's being watched. Maybe he won't try anything. Maybe, Nathan said, though he didn't believe it. At 2 in the morning, the fire alarm went off. Nathan was instantly awake, reaching for his phone. Hannah and David burst through the door simultaneously, weapons drawn. It's a false alarm, David said into his radio. Checking source now. Get them ready to move, Hannah ordered, already helping Margaret wake Kayla. If this is a diversion, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. If the Red Jackals were using the fire alarm to evacuate the building, they'd have a window to create chaos during the evacuation. "We're not leaving this room," Nathan said. "Not until we know it's safe." David checked the hallway. Smoke detector on the first floor was triggered. Fire department's en route. Could be legitimate. Could be. The window exploded inward. Glass showered across the room. David threw himself in front of Kayla and Margaret as Hannah moved to intercept. Nathan saw a shape moving outside on the fire escape. Someone had climbed up from street level, broken the window, was now reaching through to unlock it. Hannah fired twice. The figure dropped, falling backward with a cry. More shouts from below. At least 2 more people on the fire escape. "Go," Hannah yelled to David. "Get them to the stairwell." They moved as a unit. David leading with Kayla and Margaret, Nathan in the middle, Hannah bringing up the rear. The hallway was filling with smoke now. Real smoke, not just the alarm. Something was actually burning on the first floor. They made it to the stairwell, started descending. On the second floor landing, they encountered 2 Red Jackals members coming up, but David and Hannah were professionals. The confrontation was brief and decisive. 2 shots, 2 bodies dropping. They continued down, made it to the ground floor. FBI agents were already pouring through the entrance. Martinez had stationed a response team nearby, anticipating exactly this kind of attack. Leon Vance was caught trying to flee through the back exit. He was on the ground, cuffed, before he even saw the agents coming. It was over in less than 10 minutes. Nathan stood in the hotel parking lot, holding Kayla while Margaret caught her breath. His hands were shaking with adrenaline, but everyone was safe. The Red Jackal's desperate gambit had failed. Agent Martinez approached, looking grim but satisfied. "We've got 4 in custody, 2 dead on the fire escape. Leon's going back to jail, and this time there's no bail. Attempted assault on federal witnesses, that's prison time, regardless of what else happens. And Morgan Hale, we're bringing him in now. This attack, Leon coordinating it while out on bail, that's witness tampering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Combined with everything else we have, it's enough. We're filing RICO charges today." Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. It's really over. The dangerous part is over. Now comes the legal battle. But yes, Hale's going to prison. It's just a matter of how long. Margaret sagged against Nathan, exhaustion and relief overwhelming her. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Nathan corrected. "You stood up when everyone else was afraid. You showed this community that fighting back was possible." Kayla stirred in Nathan's arms, looking up at him with sleepy eyes. "Are the bad men gone?" "Yes, sweetheart, they're gone. You're safe now, forever." Nathan looked at Martinez, who nodded. "Forever," he confirmed. Morgan Hale was arrested at his estate outside Millbrook at noon. The footage made national news. Wealthy businessman led away in handcuffs, protesting his innocence, his lawyers already filing motions. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing payments from Hale's companies to the Red Jackals. Leon Vance's testimony, he decided cooperating was better than facing decades in prison alone. Statements from 12 families, all with similar stories of intimidation and theft. And the attack on the Beacon Suites, orchestrated by Leon while out on bail, pointing directly to Hale's desperation to silence witnesses. Nathan sat with Margaret and Kayla in the suite 3 days after the attack. The window had been repaired. The security was still in place but felt less oppressive now that Hale and his people were in custody. "What happens now?" Margaret asked. "Now we wait for trial. Hale's lawyers will try to get charges dismissed, but Rebecca doesn't think they'll succeed. The evidence is too strong. You'll probably have to testify at some point, but that's months away. And our house, Rebecca's filed a motion to have the seizure reversed immediately. Judge is reviewing it now. If it's approved, you could be back home within the month." Margaret looked at Kayla, who was coloring at the table, humming to herself. "I don't know if we can go back. Not after everything that's happened. Every time I think about that house, I think about them breaking down the door. About being thrown out in the snow. About nearly losing Kayla. That's understandable. But Margaret, that house is yours. They stole it. You fought to get it back. Don't let them take your home from you twice, by making you too scared to return. What if I am too scared? What if I can't get past it? then we find you somewhere else. Somewhere safe where you and Kayla can build new memories. The house isn't what matters. You two being safe and together, that's what matters. Kayla looked up from her coloring. Can Mr. Nathan come to our new house, or our old house if we go back? Nathan smiled. I'd like that very much. Good, because you're family now. Grandma said so. Nathan looked at Margaret, who was wiping her eyes. I did say that, because it's true. You saved our lives. Multiple times. You fought for us when nobody else would. That makes you family. Nathan felt his throat tighten. He'd started this thinking he was helping strangers. Somewhere along the way they'd become the most important people in his life. You're my family too, both of you. Kayla held up her drawing. 3 people holding hands, just like before, but more detailed. Grandma Margaret, Kayla, Mr. Nathan. A house in the background with a sunflower garden.
That's us, Kayla explained. When everything's okay again, everything will be okay again, Nathan promised. I don't know when, but it will be. We'll make sure of it. And looking at this makeshift family he'd found in a snowstorm, Nathan believed it. The trial of Morgan Hale began on a bitter Monday in February, 4 months after his arrest. The federal courthouse in Millbrook was overflowing with reporters, victims, and onlookers who had followed the case since the shocking arrests. Nathan sat in the gallery behind Margaret. She wore a simple blue dress Rebecca had helped her choose, dignified and restrained, the quiet image of a grandmother standing against a powerful man. Kayla wasn't there. She was spending the day with Nathan's assistant far away from a courtroom she was too young to endure. The prosecutor, Linda Morrison, presented the case with precision. Financial records traced money flowing from Hale to the Red Jackals. Former gang members described intimidation and violence. Documents showed 23 families stripped of their homes through a deliberate property seizure scheme. Then Morrison called Margaret to the stand. Margaret walked slowly, nerves visible. But once sworn in she straightened, lifted her chin, and looked directly at Morgan Hale, who sat calm and polished at the defense table. Tell the jury about the night of January 8th, Morrison said. Margaret told everything. The pounding on the door, the demand for a debt her son had died trying to repay, the forced eviction into a blizzard, her granddaughter's fever rising as the cold closed in, the desperate search for help. I thought we were going to die, Margaret said softly. I thought my granddaughter would freeze in my arms. Because Morgan Hale decided our lives were worth less than the property he wanted to steal. The defense objected. The judge overruled. Margaret continued describing years of harassment, a debt that only grew, and the terror inflicted by the Red Jackals. She spoke of going to the police and being turned away, of every official channel failing because Hale had bought protection. By the time she finished, jurors wiped tears from their faces. One stared openly at Hale with anger. The defense tried to undermine her, questioned her memory, her understanding, her son's addiction. Margaret did not waver. My son had his problems, she said steadily, but he was trying to get clean, trying to do right by his daughter. Your client's people killed him by trapping him in a debt he could never escape. Don't you dare say this was his fault. The courtroom fell silent. The defense had no response. Over 3 weeks the prosecution built an airtight case. Financial experts testified about the shell companies. FBI agents detailed the surveillance operation. Other victims told their stories, each one echoing Margaret's, each one showing the same pattern of predatory lending and violent collection. Leon Vance testified against Hale in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing in detail how the operation worked, how Hale would identify struggling homeowners, how the Red Jackals would offer loans with impossible terms, how they'd escalate to intimidation when payment faltered, how they'd force families from their homes, allowing Hale's companies to buy the properties for pennies on the dollar. It was systematic exploitation, a business model built on human suffering, and the jury heard every horrible detail. The defense tried to argue that Hale had been unaware of the Red Jackals' methods, that he'd merely purchased properties in good faith, that he couldn't be held responsible for independent contractors' actions. But the paper trail was too clear, the pattern too obvious. Hale's own emails and texts seized through warrants showed he'd known exactly what was happening and had encouraged it. On a Friday afternoon, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, conspiracy, fraud, witness intimidation. Margaret cried, So did several other victims in the gallery. Nathan put his arm around her shoulders and felt her shaking with relief and exhaustion and the weight of 4 months finally lifting. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Morgan Hale was given 14 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release. His assets were seized, including all the properties he'd stolen through the scheme. The court ordered full restitution to the victims. Margaret would get her house back, would get compensation for her suffering, would get justice for Jeremiah. The day they returned to Edgewater was sunny and clear, the winter snow finally melting into spring. Nathan drove Margaret and Kayla to their house, the small worn building that had been sitting empty for 5 months, waiting for them to come home. Rebecca Wilson met them there with the keys and the paperwork officially returning the property to Margaret's name. "It's yours again, free and clear, no debt, no liens, just your house." Margaret stood on the sidewalk, staring at the building. Nathan saw her hesitate, saw the fear still there. "I can go in first," he offered. "Make sure everything's okay." "No." Margaret squared her shoulders. "This is my home. I shouldn't be afraid to enter my own home." She walked to the door, key in hand, unlocked it, stepped inside. The house was exactly as they'd left it, dishes still in the sink, a few of Kayla's toys on the living room floor. Nathan had arranged for a cleaning service to come through, but he'd asked them not to move anything. This was Margaret's home. She should be the one to decide what stayed and what went. "It's smaller than I remembered," Margaret said quietly, walking through the rooms. "Colder. We can fix that," Nathan said. "New furniture, fresh paint, make it feel safe again." Kayla ran straight to her bedroom. "My room. It's still here." But Margaret lingered in the doorway, not quite entering her bedroom. Nathan understood. This house held too many memories, some good, but recent ones terrifying. The Red Jackals had taken more than property. They'd taken her sense of safety, her ability to feel at peace in her own home. "What if I can't live here?" Margaret whispered. "What if every time I close my eyes I see them breaking down the door?" Nathan thought carefully before answering. "Then we find you somewhere else. There's no shame in that. Sometimes places hold too much pain to heal in. But Margaret, this is your house. You fought for it. You won it back. Don't make that decision right now, when everything's still raw. Give it time. See how it feels, and if it doesn't feel right, we'll figure out something else." Margaret nodded slowly. "Will you stay tonight? I don't want to be alone here the first night." "Of course, I'll stay as long as you need." They spent the day cleaning, unpacking, trying to make the house feel like home again. Nathan's clinic staff brought by casseroles and baked goods, a steady stream of people who'd been following Margaret's case and wanted to help. Sandra Holloway and Robert Torres stopped by, other victims from the trial, offering support and sharing their own struggles with returning to places that had been violated. By evening the house looked better, felt better. Kayla was playing happily in her room, seemingly unbothered by the months away. Children were resilient like that. Margaret and Nathan sat on the front porch as the sun set, watching the neighborhood come alive. Edgewater looked different now, felt different. With the Red Jackals dismantled and Morgan Hale in prison, people were starting to emerge from their houses, starting to talk to neighbors, starting to rebuild what had been broken. "Thank you," Margaret said quietly, "for everything, for stopping that night, for not giving up on us, for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away." "Your family," Nathan said simply. "I don't walk away from family." "Will you keep visiting after everything settles, or will you go back to your life and will just be a case you helped once?" Nathan thought about his apartment in Millbrook, his work at the clinic, the life he'd had before that snowy night in January. It felt distant now, like a different person's life. "I'll keep visiting," he promised. "As often as you'll have me." Kayla already said I'm family. Can't disappoint her. Margaret smiled, real and warm and more relaxed than Nathan had seen her since that first night. "Then you're stuck with us. Hope you're ready for family dinners and birthday parties and a 4-year-old who thinks you hang the moon." "I can't think of anything better." They sat together as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Inside, Kayla called out for her grandmother, wanting help with a puzzle. Margaret rose to go inside, then paused. "Nathan, my son Jeremiah, he would have liked you. Would have been grateful someone like you was looking out for his girl." Nathan felt his throat tighten.
I wish I could have known him. He was a good man who made bad choices. Addiction does that, takes good people and hollows them out. But at his core, Jeremiah wanted to do right by his family. Just like you. She touched Nathan's shoulder gently. Thank you for making sure his death meant something. For turning his tragedy into justice for all those families. After she went inside, Nathan sat alone on the porch, thinking about the path that had led him here. One decision to stop instead of drive past had changed multiple lives, had taken down a criminal enterprise, had created a family where there'd been only strangers. His father had called after the verdict, his voice stiff but genuine. You did good work, your mother would be proud. It was the closest thing to approval Nathan had ever gotten from Harrison Ward. And it meant more than he'd expected. Nathan pulled out his phone, looked at the photo Kayla had drawn, 3 people holding hands, hearts and stars surrounding them. He'd kept it as his wallpaper, a reminder of what he was fighting for. His phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca Wilson, counties dropping charges against all the other Red Jackals members who cooperated. They're getting probation and community service. Leon got 8 years, Hale's appealing but unlikely to succeed. We won. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against a system designed to protect wealthy criminals, against years of corruption and fear, they'd won. Nathan replied, thank you for everything, couldn't have done this without you. Rebecca, you did the hard part. You saw someone who needed help and you stopped. Everything else followed from that one choice. One choice. That's all it took to change everything. Nathan stood, stretched, and went inside. Found Margaret and Kayla in the kitchen, making dinner together. Kayla was standing on a stool, helping stir something on the stove while Margaret supervised. Mr. Nathan, Kayla called out when she saw him. We're making spaghetti. Want to stay for dinner? I'd love to, Nathan said and meant it with his whole heart. Because this kitchen, this family, this moment of ordinary domestic peace, was worth every risk, every threat, every sleepless night, worrying about their safety. This was what justice looked like. Not just courtroom verdicts and prison sentences, but families restored, homes reclaimed, lives rebuilt. This was what made everything worthwhile. 2 months after the trial, on a warm April afternoon, Nathan helped Margaret plant sunflowers in the front yard. The same sunflowers her husband had grown decades ago, before cancer took him, before Jeremiah's addiction, before everything had fallen apart. Sunflowers always struck me as optimistic, Margaret said, pressing seeds into the soft earth. They follow the sun. They grow tall even in difficult conditions. They're resilient, like you, Nathan observed. Like all of us who survived Morgan Hale. Margaret sat back on her heels, surveying the freshly planted row. Did you hear? Sandra Holloway's reopening her shop. Robert Torres got his store back. Even Mrs. Patterson 2 doors down, who I thought had dementia, turned out to just be traumatized and depressed. She's getting treatment now, talking again. The whole neighborhood's coming back to life. That's what happens when you remove the poison. Things start growing again. Kayla ran across the yard, her arms full of dandelions she'd picked. Look, I found yellow flowers like the ones we're planting. Those are beautiful, sweetie, Margaret said. Why don't you put them in a jar for the kitchen table? As Kayla ran inside, Nathan noticed how much she'd changed in 4 months. The fear had faded from her eyes, the cough was long gone. She looked like a normal 5-year-old, happy, energetic, secure in her grandmother's love and their reclaimed home. I've been thinking, Margaret said, returning her attention to the planting, about the other families, the ones who lost everything before we could stop Hale. There's still so much need in Edgewater. What are you thinking? A fund. Using the restitution money. I don't need $200,000. I never expected to get anything. But there are families here who do need it. Medical care, education, home repairs, food security. She looked at Nathan. Would your clinic help administer something like that? Make sure the money goes where it's actually needed. Nathan felt pride swell in his chest. Of course, I think it's a wonderful idea. I want to call it the Jeremiah Sullivan Memorial Fund. So his name means something good. So Kayla grows up knowing her father's legacy isn't just addiction and debt, but community support and healing. He'd be honored. They worked in companionable silence, planting hope in the form of sunflower seeds. Nathan's hands were dirty, his back aching from bending, and he couldn't remember ever being happier. His phone buzzed. Jessica from the clinic. Nathan, we've got a situation. Family just showed up at the clinic. Elderly grandmother, 2 grandkids, pneumonia, they're from Edgewater. They say debt collectors evicted them 3 months ago, and they've been living in their car. Can we help? Nathan met Margaret's eyes, saw her nod before he even asked. Yes, Nathan told Jessica, we can help. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He stood, brushed dirt from his jeans. I have to go. Emergency at the clinic. Another family like us. Sounds like it. Margaret stood too, placed her hand on his arm. Go help them. That's what you do. That's who you are. We'll be here when you get back. Nathan drove to the clinic, his mind already working through logistics. Where could they house this family? What resources did they need? How could they connect them with legal help, medical care, food assistance? The work was endless. For every family they helped, 10 more appeared with similar stories. Poverty, debt, exploitation. The systems that had enabled Morgan Hale's operation were still in place. Taking down one criminal didn't fix the underlying problems, but it was a start. And every family helped was another step toward a world where people like Margaret and Kayla didn't have to fight alone. At the clinic, Nathan found the family huddled in the waiting room. A woman, maybe 72 children around 7 and 9. All 3 were coughing, feverish, exhausted. The woman's eyes held that same desperate look Margaret's had held that night in the snow. Nathan crouched in front of them. I'm Nathan Ward, I run this clinic. You're safe here, we're going to take care of you. The woman's eyes filled with tears. We don't have money, we can't pay. You don't need money, that's not how we work here. Nathan turned to Jessica. Get them examined immediately. Start antibiotics, and call Rita at the Beacon Suites. We need emergency housing. As the medical staff took the family back for treatment, Nathan thought about that snowy night in January, about the decision to stop instead of drive past, about how one choice had led to another, creating a cascade of change that was still rippling outward. He couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix every broken system, couldn't undo decades of poverty and exploitation and corrupt officials looking the other way, but he could help this family, could give them what Margaret and Kayla had needed. Safety, medical care, someone willing to fight for them. One family at a time. That's how you change the world. By seeing people, by stopping, by choosing to help even when it was hard. 3 months later, on a sunny July afternoon, Millbrook held a community celebration in the park. It was officially for the 4th of July, but everyone knew it was really celebrating the dismantling of the Red Jackals and the conviction of Morgan Hale. Margaret sat at a picnic table with Kayla, watching children play on the playground equipment the city had just installed. Nathan's clinic had sponsored the playground, using donations that had poured in after the trial made national news. Other organizations had followed suit. Food programs, after-school tutoring, job training. Millbrook and Edgewater were slowly transforming from dying towns into communities with hope. Grandma, can I go play? Kayla asked, eyeing the swings. Of course, baby, stay where I can see you. Kayla ran off, her bright yellow dress, new, bought with restitution money, fluttering around her legs. Margaret watched her go, marveling at the transformation. 7 months ago, this child had nearly died of pneumonia in her arms. Now she was running and laughing, and being 5 years old. Nathan slid onto the bench beside Margaret, handing her a bottle of cold water. Thought you might need this, it's getting warm. Thank you. Margaret took the water gratefully. Have you seen the turnout? Must be 300 people here. More. The whole county's showing up. Your story resonated, Margaret. People were inspired by what you did. I didn't do anything special, just survived. You did more than survive. You fought back. You refused to accept injustice. You showed everyone else they could fight too. Nathan gestured around the park. All of this, the playground, the programs, the community organizing, it started because you wouldn't give up. Because you were brave when it mattered most. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. I was terrified, every day. Even now sometimes I wake up at night and think I hear them pounding on the door. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. You taught me that. Rebecca Wilson joined them, looking relaxed in jeans and a t-shirt, a far cry from her usual courtroom attire. There's the woman of the hour. How does it feel to be a hero, Margaret? I'm not a hero, I'm just a grandmother who wanted her home back. You're a hero to 12 families who got their lives back because of your testimony. You're a hero to everyone in Edgewater who doesn't have to live in fear anymore. Own it. Agent Martinez appeared with sandwiches from the food truck. Heard through the grapevine that Morgan Hale's appeal was denied. He's staying in prison for the full 14 years. Margaret sagged with relief. She'd been dreading the possibility of him winning on appeal, of having to testify again, of him somehow getting released. It's really over. It's really over. You won. Completely and totally. They sat together, this unlikely team that had formed in crisis, a grandmother, a clinic director, a lawyer, an FBI agent. They'd been strangers 7 months ago. Now they were friends, bonded by shared purpose and hard-won victory. Kayla ran back from the playground, out of breath and grinning. Mr. Nathan, there's a bounce house. Can I go? May I? Margaret corrected gently. May I go? Yes, you may, but only for 30 minutes, then we're having lunch. Kayla took off running. Nathan watched her go, smiling. She's doing so well. You've done an amazing job helping her heal. We've done an amazing job, Margaret corrected. Your clinic provided her therapy. Rebecca helped me understand trauma responses. Patricia, she nodded to Martinez, made sure we felt safe. It took all of us. That's how community works, Nathan said. Nobody heals alone. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret found herself surrounded by people wanting to thank her. Other victims from the trial. Community members who'd lived in fear of the Red Jackals for years. Strangers who'd followed the case and been inspired. One woman, maybe 40, with a young daughter, approached hesitantly. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Amy Brennan. The Red Jackals came after my family 2 years ago. We gave up our house without fighting, because we thought there was no point. But watching you stand up to them, watching you win, it made me realize I should have fought, should have believed justice was possible. It's never too late to fight for what's right, Margaret said gently. Have you talked to Rebecca? She might be able to help you recover what you lost. I did. She's reviewing my case. But I wanted to thank you for showing me, showing all of us, that we don't have to accept injustice, that ordinary people can beat powerful criminals if we're brave enough to try. After Amy left, Margaret leaned against Nathan, suddenly exhausted. I don't feel brave, I feel lucky that you stopped that night. Lucky that people like you, and Rebecca and Patricia were willing to help. Without you, Kayla and I would be dead or disappeared. The Red Jackals would still be operating. Nothing would have changed, but I did stop. And you were brave enough to accept help, to testify, to fight. We're all links in the same chain, Margaret. Remove any one of us, and it doesn't work. But together, he gestured at the celebration around them. Together we changed everything. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, Margaret watched Kayla play with other children. Watched Nathan talking animatedly with clinic staff, watched Rebecca and Patricia laughing together, watched a community that had been broken start to heal. 7 months ago, she'd thought her life was over, had accepted that she and Kayla would die in the snow, victims of a system designed to crush people like them. Instead they'd survived, fought, won, and in winning had sparked something larger. A movement of people refusing to accept exploitation, demanding justice, rebuilding what criminals had destroyed. Jeremiah would be proud, Margaret thought. His death hadn't been meaningless after all. His daughter would grow up in a world slightly better than the one he'd left, and his mother, broken, terrified, certain she'd failed him, had found the strength to fight in his name. Thank you, Margaret whispered to the evening sky, to Jeremiah, to whatever force had put Nathan Ward on that street the night they needed him most. Thank you for the second chance. Kayla ran back, threw her arms around Margaret. Best day ever, Grandma. Can we come back tomorrow? We'll see, baby, we'll see. And as Margaret held her granddaughter, surrounded by friends who'd become family, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, real deep peace, the kind that came from knowing you'd fought for what mattered and won. From knowing you were loved and safe and home. The sunflowers they'd planted were already sprouting, small green shoots pushing up through the earth, reaching for the sun, resilient, optimistic, exactly like the people who'd planted them. And Margaret Sullivan, 72 years old and stronger than she'd ever known, smiled at the future and felt nothing but hope.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.